Technology Showcase, Tori Smith, co-founder and CEO, Endiatx.
Thank you so much for that introduction. It's a real honor to be here at MedTech Malta on this beautiful island, and we would very much like to thank the sponsors of this event. We'd like to thank everyone who's shown up, all the investors that have come to see tech, all the founders in the room building amazing stuff. Thanks, everyone. This has been quite a little experience. And so what I'd like to show you on this stage is a Silicon Valley startup company. And so I'll create a lot of hot air for you tonight. Chris here is central here because in Act 3, we're going to do a little demonstration. And then we have Quentin, we have Cameron, we have Kevin. This is deep tech. So we want to do a deep dive into the human body, and we want to do that with robot pills. And so initially, you can see all kinds of cool laptops and brilliant engineers sweating furiously over the tech. However, we think that soon doctors will control these robots just using the iPhone in their pocket. That would be pretty cool. So what does one of these little robots look like? What I'd like to explain to you guys is that with a pill that can move under its own power, we can start a little adventure and we can start a conversation. And the conversation is, what does the world look like when inexpensive, small robots can travel around in the human body? Could they find illness? Could they fix the illness? Could we create an ecosystem where over time, these robots get smaller? And where would they go? Would they leave the GI tract? Would they go other places, maybe even into the brain? So let's start that adventure. And like we said, this will be in 3 acts. Act 1 is this conversation we have here with proper introductions. Act 2, which begins soon, is a serious dive into the metrics about what we think we're doing. And finally, in Act 3, we'd like to get real and actually show you PillBot in action. So there's a rule in Silicon Valley. If you are starting a deep tech company in medical space, you have to have a really weird name. What even does Endiatx mean? Endiatx means to go inside the human body, to understand what is wrong, and to fix it. And this is important. We're going to begin this adventure in a sensible place, in the stomach. And so if you've ever had a belly ache, or you had a friend with an ulcer or a lesion, you might know someone with Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, sometimes it makes sense to have a look around and figure out why we have these aches and pains. And this is very important for acute healthcare, but there's also a silent killer, which is stomach cancer. We are getting really good at screening for colon cancer. Thank goodness, it's wonderful. These days, colon cancer is a thing people can survive, right? But stomach cancer does not yet have an effective screening. And unfortunately, here's why, right? This is what it takes for us to have a 5-minute look into your body. You might have had symptoms, you might have gone to the emergency room, you might have been referred to your primary care. Then eventually you get a referral to a gastroenterologist, and after that, you go there multiple times. We try diets, we try antacids, and finally, we give you an upper endoscopy. And that's a long adventure. And what we propose is that we turn all of that, every last bit of it, into one video call from home. So we would do that with PillBot. And PillBot is a friendly little moving eyeball in the human stomach. PillBot is a drone. PillBot has a camera. We give a live video feed to a gastroenterologist. PillBot is a video game. PillBot is a friendly conversation with your doctor while you're sitting in home. Drink some water, skip your breakfast, and let your doctor have a little journey. And instead of being knocked out, be lucid, be face-to-face, talk about your symptoms, and see in real time what PillBot sees. See what your doctor sees, and hopefully figure out why your tummy aches. So if we can do this, it's going to start to change the conversation we have with patients. Because right now, we have to be very careful metering out intense technology like an upper endoscopy. I can't jam a tube down everyone's throat every time they have a bellyache. That's totally inappropriate, right? It's risky, it's costly. So there's gatekeeping. You know, sometimes we hear in the UK there are almost 500,000 people waiting for a basic gastroscopy. So there's an overloaded system, and if we can make it easier to have a look around, I think we're going to help people. And at a population level, if we can have a look around inside your stomach decades earlier, well, then we're going to catch things like stomach cancer in time to cure them, right? And that's what we're waiting for at Endiatx, is the first time a doctor calls us up and says, it was so cheap and easy to deploy PillBot that I use it in a young person today, and I found a cancer, and we're going to cure that cancer. And in a world where we transform multiple hospital visits into Zoom calls, well, that's a world with fewer diesel fumes, fewer giant catheters in garbage cans. That's a room where we need fewer hospital beds. That's a cleaner, greener, more accessible world. You know, in the upper endoscopy world, even if you have the best healthcare in the world, you might have months of gatekeeping, unfortunately. Now imagine you don't have the best healthcare in the world. What if you're in sub-Saharan Africa? Well, our question is, what if we went to Africa, and what if we started building robots there, made some awesome jobs, and treated local people? This is a whole new deal. It's like a new medical deal for people. And there are a lot of ways that you can analyze an opportunity. One would be to ask how many people in the world have stomachs who don't want to die of stomach cancer. And that's obviously kind of a funny way to look at it. Another way to ask what is the opportunity here is to say, well, how much do we spend on endoscopes every year? You know, if we're creating a virtual endoscope, maybe we could participate in the endoscope market. And we find some huge numbers. And so we're not really here after any particular number. We're here to show that tiny robots in the body might be safe, they might be affordable, and they might simply be the beginning of a wonderful new place to live. And let's talk about our competition. Let's talk about this landscape we live in, and let's talk about the shoulders of the giants that we're standing on. In October of 1997, a pill camera was swallowed. How cool was that, right? We can swallow electronic capsules, and we've been doing it for more than 25 years, right? Let's make them move. There are electronic capsules that move in the human body. There's an amazing company, NaviCam, FDA cleared. They use magnetic fields to move capsules around inside the stomach. Patients love it. I mean, it's so much better than an endoscopy. What do we want to add to this? Well, maybe we don't have to go to the hospital. You know, this technology with PillBot, it moves under its own power. It's telemedicine enabled. And so we really do hope to add to this landscape. And finally, can we build a tool that a gastroenterologist can reach for every single day, right? The endoscope. We would very much like to be the world's first virtual endoscope. And so how do you start with an idea and fund a company and move from your garage into a big facility? You know, the journey of founding is wonderful, and I think many people in this room know that journey quite well. You know, initially we felt, let's de-risk the mechanical hardware. Let's prove to the world that you can build little tiny robots and swallow them, right? That's a critical part of it. Recently, the technology's been working so well that we start swallowing the robots and demonstrating them. And you know, what I can say now is that we're on the precipice of clinical trials, and it's a wonderful time to be at Endiatx. And thanks to Chris's efforts, who has been here every single day, you know, every single day, taking us and putting us into boardrooms, putting us at the top of skyscrapers, building the Series A proposition for this company. We actually expect to be through FDA in just a few years, early 2026 if we can pull this off. This is an exciting time. FDA has said they're willing to talk to us about PillBot in December, and we have some questions. We want to ask them about 3D printed materials. We want to ask them about lithium chemistry, right? We want to ask them if they see the opportunity that we see. And then we want to enter clinical trials. So initially, let's be very straightforward and tangible. Let's create a tool. We'll call it PillBot. It's a virtual endoscope. Let's give that tool to gastroenterologists to make them superstars. Many of their patients won't have to come into the clinic. Many of their patients won't have to be sedated. That would have been awesome during COVID, right? But then let's let this technology expand beyond the world of GI. Let's let ER docs use this technology. Nurses, technicians, right? Maybe you could be in a refugee camp but have this 21st century telemedicine. That would be pretty cool. And let's make sure that we are filing patents and working with people to take this dream, make it real, and make sure that it's defensible enough so that it can be funded, right? Let's make sure that this is a balance between advances in healthcare, but also a business enterprise that people are willing to join as stakeholders. And we're very proud to basically be pushing all of these fronts forward. And for this slide, which I'm kind of hoping is, beginning to move towards Act 3. For this slide, I'd like to really focus on where we go beyond PillBot, right? The stomach represents maybe 70 million people every year, where we could actually maybe turn those hospital visits into Zoom calls. So the stomach is very compelling. But what about taking tissue samples, right? Endoscopes take samples. Endoscopes actually cut, they sample, they treat the problem. We also wish to do the same. Pill surgeon is a trademark that we were very excited to get along with PillBot. And the whole idea is, if we're making a moving robotic platform, well, let's put stuff on it. And who knows what we will put on it? I don't think that this team will have all of those ideas. I think we'd like to open this technology stack up to this room and to this community. What would you do with tiny robots in the body? If I can give you a form factor, if I can give you electronic support, radio communication, electrical power, mechanical power, what would you do with this, right? Well, we want to do microsurgery. And we want to do it in the GI tract. We'd like to move beyond the stomach market. But then we'd like to go smaller, right? There was a crazy scenario where, insects lay larvae that can crawl and do crazy things in bodies, right? It's kind of scary. Well, why can't we do biomimicry, right? If a botfly larvae can go into the human body, well, why don't we create a tiny little rice grain-sized version of this robot? Imagine that, the world's most efficient brain surgeon, the microsurgeon. What if you had brain cancer, but you knew there was a small army of microsurgeons eating that tumor carefully, methodically, day by day, week by week? This could be a persistent therapeutic presence in people who have been told they have no other options. I'd like to say the world of aerospace engineering and the deep tech community think otherwise. We think we can do better than that. All right, if we work together. So that's the microsurgeon. And where do we go beyond, right? I think the interesting beyond, from that is, besides all the nanotech that we certainly hope to see in generations to come, is a new kind of data value, a new data proposition. We live in a world where AI is here to stay. And what is AI? AI is the world's data put to a purpose. So we need data to build AI. Well, if you can only get data in an upper endoscopy in a hospital with tubes jammed into the human body, then it's like breathing through a straw, like we are being suffocated for this lack of data. I think PillBot changes that in a fundamental way. We're going to have a flood of data coming from millions of these tiny little inexpensive robots. And so initially, that data can be put to work. Let's make it easy to drive them. right? A little bit of data analytics would help with that. Let's make sure that we're not missing things that we might miss if we're tired. Sometimes we might be able to let the AI take over and drive, and we'll be brought in when it's a really difficult case, right? There's a case here where eventually this kind of healing technology could one day be on a pharmacy shelf. But before we really go to that place, I'd rather just wind the clock back to today. Let's make it easy to have a quick look inside your stomach. And so with that, draw your attention to Quentin. Quentin here basically dropped everything to come from France, his home country, and become our chief engineer. Now, his degree is in artificial intelligence, among others, and Quentin sees a future world. And here we are at this inflection point, right? We're at this inflection point, basically where the old world of the mechanical and the new world of the digital are having this conversation. And so we're very honored, to move towards Act 3. What we're about to show you is not an FDA-released product. This is our research and development live on stage. So please give us a little bit of an understanding that it's not perfect, but it is real. And we're going to be very excited to show you this in action. So what I see is a robot, and that robot is blinking and it's generating live video. Let's see if we can put the video up on the screen. Awesome. So initially, for this demo, we're going to start by showing you directly how PillBot moves in the stomach. And so we have our little stomach model. And basically, we're going to show you how we swim. PillBot is a little swimming drone, an eyeball, if you will. And we can actually see, say hi to PillBot. Yeah, this is a lot of fun. So if we're going to duplicate an endoscope one for one, we need this thing to move in X, Y, and Z. So we like to tell a GI, PillBot is the tip of the endoscope minus the endoscope. Yeah, this is a lot of fun. It turns out we live in a world where a kid can fly a drone around their park on a Saturday, and that drone might have cost $50, right? That's the world we live in. Why not make PillBot for $50? We can do that. That's about the cost of goods right now. It's a little teeny drone that swims in your stomach if you're willing to drink some water, if you're willing to skip your breakfast and your lunch and potentially dinner as well. I'm sorry, Chris. Right? The prep is drink some water. That's a lot more fun than other types of GI prep. So with that being said, maybe it's time for Chris to have his first meal of the day. So what we're going to do now is grab an antenna and move that antenna pretty close to Chris, probably right against his belly. And I'm hoping that the PillBot package would be about the size of a deck of cards. Right? I'd like a cheap little deck of cards that you would take. A little dongle, like a jump drive, is the other side of the radio link. Everything else connects to your phone. It's just digital from there. Single-use disposable, cheap, accessible. Chris, let's do it. And now it's going to move down Chris's esophagus, and Quentin may come in and adjust the location of the radio. Right now, we give ourselves every chance for a good connection. And so, yeah, Quentin, let's help him out. We have about the data link of a typical Zoom call, and that's kind of what we have to work with in generation 1. And if we need be, we can have Chris step up and we can try different positions. Yeah, this is a typical day at the office for Endiatx. And the fun thing is, you know, we'll see if we can get a good contact here. We also brought a bunch of other robots, so if we have to have Chris start swallowing robot after robot, we can do that. Yeah. One thing is the guys often tell me that they don't want me to do so many surprise demos because I burn through all of our stock of robots. So should we call that round 1? Now, in the meantime, if we need to give these guys 2 or 3 minutes, I am perfectly ready to take a few questions, fill some time. Would anyone like to have a question or comment about what we're working on here? We'd be super happy to take that. Yep.
Yes, I'm a medical doctor myself, and I was wondering, like many cancers also arise at the distant level of the esophagus, and your pill is in water in the stomach. How does it look at cancers like at the distal part of the esophagus?
This is an excellent question. The question is, I see you swimming around in your stomach model, but what about when you swallow it? It's this one-way trip through the esophagus. And so that means we're not going to be able to give you as much effectiveness as a proper endoscope. Now, we will record that path. We will hopefully use AI to pick up some information. If we're talking about Barrett's esophagus, which is a growing concern in the upper GI, often associated with acid reflux, you want to get those symptoms checked, by the way. One thing we do for Barrett's is in the stomach, we'll have a look at where the esophagus enters in. We call that the Z-fold interface, and you can pick up some information there. But I want to be very clear that PillBot in the esophagus is probably a secondary value proposition. Aha! Round 2. And Quentin, why don't you follow it down? Yeah. So I'm rooting for a data signal, and I hope the 2 robots don't fight each other. You know, if the problem persists with Chris, maybe you want to have me swallow one. Maybe I have the perfect stomach today. Aha! Okay, this is good sign. So we've acquired a signal. Now now we're getting a little bit of video here. You could even go all the way around the back. Okay. This is a little bit more typical. This is what we try to usually see right at the beginning when we swallow one. Now, the view that we can offer today with PillBot is actually through the lens of an old iPhone camera, a very old camera that's available very cheap. The optical work that we're doing now is intended to mimic the proper quality of an endoscope. And so the challenges that we're working through right now are dramatically opening up the field of view. Right now, we're looking through a very narrow field of view. We also have some focus issues. You know, we're definitely working on proper image processing. But what we're hoping to demonstrate here is that you can actually do an upper endoscopy in a relatively lightweight environment. We've even tested PillBot in the cockpit of an airplane when we were having buoyancy problems, flying ballistic trajectories. And so, you know, this is R&D, but we actually are scheduled to have the new robot in clinical trials with a new camera and new set of optics in just a few months. You know, and I think we should probably improve our data link some. Instead of having to chase the signal around, I'm hoping we can get to the point where the antenna would just be anywhere in the room or maybe in your vest pocket, something like that. Chris usually has the most interesting stomach imagery because he has freckles in his stomach, and we're starting to name them, right? Kind of like Disney characters. Do we have any other questions in the meantime? And then one thing these guys can do is when we're getting continuous video, they can start trying to activate the propulsion system. One of the challenges we're working through between the fish tank demo and the swallow is that during the swallow, the esophagus has mucus, and sometimes we get a little bit of mucus in the thruster lumens, and we're trying to figure out how we might get around that. Maybe put a dissolvable cover, or just make sure those thrusters can clear some mucus. Yes, sir.
So there's some people who have a tough time taking their daily vitamins, let alone swallowing pills. Do you think that eventually you'll even work on the size of it?
This is a great question. So the question is, how the heck am I going to swallow that giant scary pill, right? And it's important to note that in the world of passive pill cameras, the statistics are about 1 in 20 normal adults will reject a pill camera and say that they're not going to be able to swallow that. And so we are a full millimeter larger in diameter than a typical pill camera, and that means I would expect maybe 1 in 10 people would easily say this is a problem for me. But the question is, how do we get past that, right? We have devices on the drawing board now that will be smaller than any pill camera. You know, we make it pretty clear in our communications that the goal is to go even to rice grain size, right, or beyond. So I think in the meantime, we have to acknowledge that not everyone will easily swallow a giant pill, but hopefully a substantial portion of the patient population might be willing to give it a try. It's kind of nice to finally see some connection. One thing we'd like to see more of, and you might have seen during the fish tank itself, is a more rapid frame rate. You know, in the early days of Endiatx, we could only do about maybe 5 frames per second, which does not feel like a video. It would be a very frustrating video game to play. Nowadays, with proper connection, we're closer to 15 frames per second, and it finally feels live. It finally feels like an active device. And that's definitely a wonderful moment, but I think here we're just barely making contact. Do we have any other questions in the meantime? Yes, sir.
Hi, yeah, so one of the advantages of endoscopy is insufflation and irrigation. Is there any plans for including that or any possibility of at least insufflation?
This is a great question. So what happens if in the process of swallowing a pill, what if it goes down the wrong hole, right? This could potentially be a very threatening situation. And so we have to kind of rely on the metrics, inclusion and exclusion criteria, a little bit of training or at least instruction that the world of passive pill cameras provides us. It provides a template. It doesn't necessarily provide the total answer, but it definitely gives us a good start. The basic idea would be if you are okay to swallow a pill camera, then hopefully you'd be okay to swallow PillBot. But it's not just the risk of choking it down. You might actually accidentally bite PillBot. And I'll tell you, as a mechanical designer, one of the things that I am sort of sweating the most about right now is understanding that we're going to have to run these through bite tests, which inevitably means we'll probably need to thicken up the structural shell. And what that means is, as we add weight to the device, the size or the volume of air necessary to generate neutral buoyancy also increases. And so with Endiatx, there's always a circular pressure to try to reduce size and reduce weight in order to keep the overall volume down. And so what I will say about PillBot of today is it's just barely entering sort of the real functional stage, and we will need to add an additional margin of safety on top of the R&D device you see now. Now we have a little bit of time left. Any other questions?
This is super cool. You know, I'm a thoracic surgeon, and I do a lot of endoscopies, and if I can do less endoscopies, that'd be great. Really fantastic presentation and really innovative. I do have a question. It would be interesting to see what you think about it. When I dictate an endoscopy report, one thing that is key to dictate is, see, I saw everything, right? Because I want to rule out something bad. How do you think you're going to be sure, or how do you think you're going to address the issue? Have you visualized the entire stomach to be able to rule out anything?
This is a great question. So the question is, you know, how do we know we just did a full stomach visualization? How do we make sure we didn't just miss a lesion? And those lesions can be very subtle. It can be hard to see them. I think part of the answer here, and this is an opportunity for all of GI, is that as we are getting imagery off of PillBot, within a month or so, maybe several months, we'll have an inertial chip on board. So we'll have XYZ positional and orientation data. And I think when you take all the pictures and you take your known location and orientation, you can start to stitch together a three-dimensional map of that anatomy. And where I'm going with this is, at the beginning, I think it should yield a diagnostic product that should be fun. You should be able to rotate it around. You should be able to see things. Hopefully you have some data analytics, you know, where you can take advantage. But moving beyond that, you know, if we put on our Apple Vision Pro headset, we should be able to see a hologram inside Chris. We should be able to see a giant stomach model and start telling the AI to start targeting certain areas. I'm hoping that we bring an element of 21st century kind of science fiction into this. And so the hope here is to kind of start the conversation, and let's hopefully get this little product out into clinical trials and see how far we can go with it. So with that being said, I think we're just slightly over time, and I would like to thank everyone here for showing up. I'd like to thank the tech team for working through a couple of challenges. But really, I'd just like to say that we are very proud to be able to take you under the hood and show you in real time what deep tech in the medical device community can look like. And you know, sometimes we get a perfect shot, and that kind of keeps the team going for a few weeks. But you know, it's a bit of an inflection point for us. And to be here in Malta and share this moment with you is something that we are very grateful for. Thank you.